What if I told you that buried beneath the ruins of a 900-year-old monastery in northern England, archaeologists discovered a sealed storage room containing food that was still perfectly edible? Not just edible, but nutritionally superior to most modern processed foods. This isn't science fiction. This is the forgotten wisdom of medieval survival that kept entire populations alive through plagues, famines, and the harshest winters in recorded history. While we panic over expiration dates and rush to grocery stores, our ancestors possessed knowledge so powerful that a single peasant's pantry could sustain a family for years without a single trip to market. Today, I'm going to reveal 15 ancient survival foods that have literally outlasted entire civilizations. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why modern peppers are desperately trying to rediscover these medieval secrets that could mean the difference between life and death in any crisis. The lost art of true food preservation. Picture this. It's 1347. The Black Death is sweeping across Europe, killing 1/3 of the population. Trade routes are collapsing, farms are abandoned, and entire villages are becoming ghost towns. Yet somehow, in remote monasteries and peasant households, people are not just surviving, they're thriving. How? They possessed something we've completely lost in our modern world, the knowledge of foods that literally never expire. These weren't just preserved foods, they were nutritional powerhouses that actually improved with age. While we throw away food after a few days past its best-by date, medieval peasants were eating provisions that had been stored for decades, sometimes even generations. The most shocking part, many of these foods are more nutritious after years of storage than the day they were made. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. When archaeologists excavate medieval sites, they regularly find these foods in perfect condition after 500, 600, even 1,000 years. In 2019, a team excavating a medieval castle in Scotland found a sealed clay pot containing what appeared to be honey. When tested, it was not only perfectly safe to eat but contained active enzymes and beneficial bacteria that had been dormant for over 800 years. The moment it was exposed to air, it came back to life. Food, Merbera 1. The immortal crystals. Pure sea salt. Let's start with the most incredible survival food ever discovered, one that has literally never been found spoiled, no matter how old. Pure sea salt isn't just a preservative, it's an immortal food that defies time itself. In the ancient salt mines of Wieliczka, Poland, miners have found salt deposits that are millions of years old, and every single grain is as pure and usable as the day it was formed. But here's what makes medieval salt truly extraordinary. It wasn't just sodium chloride like our modern table salt. Medieval sea salt contained over 80 trace minerals essential for human survival. When properly harvested and stored, this salt could preserve meat for decades while simultaneously providing crucial electrolytes that prevented scurvy, rickets, and dozens of other nutritional deficiencies. The medieval process was ingenious. Peasants would collect seawater in shallow clay pans during low tide, allowing the sun and wind to evaporate the water over several weeks. What remained wasn't just salt. It was a complete mineral supplement that could sustain human life indefinitely. A single pound of this medieval salt contained enough trace minerals to prevent malnutrition for months. Archaeological evidence shows that properly stored medieval salt has remained completely unchanged for over 2,000 years. Roman salt found in sealed amphorae is chemically identical to freshly harvested sea salt. But here's the kicker. This salt actually improves with age. The longer it's stored, the more the minerals crystallize into their most bioavailable forms. Medieval peasants knew something we've forgotten. Salt isn't just a seasoning, it's medicine. They use different types of salt for different purposes. Fine salt for daily cooking, coarse salt for preserving meat, and mineral-rich salt for treating illness. During the medieval period, salt was so valuable that Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt. That's where we get the word salary. Food number 2. The liquid gold that defeated death. Raw honey. If salt is immortal, then honey is the nectar of the gods. But not just any honey. We're talking about raw, unprocessed honey that contains the complete ecosystem of the hive. Medieval peasants didn't just use honey as a sweetener. They used it as medicine, preservative, and emergency food that could sustain life when everything else failed. The science behind honey's immortality is absolutely fascinating. Raw honey has a water content so low that bacteria simply cannot survive in it. But that's just the beginning. Honey contains hydrogen peroxide, which is constantly produced by an enzyme called glucose oxidase. This means honey is literally self-sterilizing. It kills harmful bacteria while preserving beneficial compounds. In 2015, archaeologists excavating ancient Egyptian tombs found sealed jars of honey that were over 3,000 years old. When tested, this honey was not only perfectly edible, but contained active enzymes, antioxidants, and antimicrobial compounds that were more potent than many modern medicines. The honey had actually concentrated and purified over the millennia, becoming more powerful with age. Medieval beekeepers understood something that modern science is just rediscovering. The type of flowers bees visit determines the medicinal properties of the honey. Honey from wildflower meadows was used for general health. Honey from linden trees was used for respiratory problems. And honey from heather was considered the most potent medicine of all. But here's what makes medieval honey truly extraordinary. It was never heated or processed. Modern honey is often pasteurized, which destroys the very enzymes that make it immortal. Medieval honey retained all its natural properties, including beneficial bacteria, enzymes, and even pollen grains that provided additional nutrition. The preservation power of honey was legendary. Medieval peasants would submerge entire fruits, vegetables, and even meat in honey to preserve them indefinitely. Honey-preserved foods found in medieval sites are often in better condition than the containers holding them. Food number 3, the living stones. Aged hard cheese. Medieval hard cheese wasn't just food, it was edible rock that could survive anything nature threw at it. These weren't the soft cheeses we know today. They were dense, mineral-rich blocks that became harder and more nutritious with age. Some medieval cheeses were aged for decades, becoming so hard they had to be grated with metal tools or dissolved in hot liquid. The medieval cheese-making process was a carefully guarded secret passed down through generations. It began with raw milk from grass-fed animals, which contained beneficial bacteria and enzymes that modern pasteurization destroys. This milk was cultured with specific bacterial strains that had been maintained for centuries, creating cheeses with unique flavors and preservation properties. What made these cheeses truly immortal was the aging process. Medieval cheese caves maintained perfect temperature and humidity levels year-round. The cheeses were regularly turned and treated with salt, developing thick, protective rinds that sealed in nutrition while keeping out harmful bacteria. Some of these aging caves are still in use today, with bacterial cultures that are over 1,000 years old. Archaeological discoveries have revealed medieval cheeses that are still perfectly preserved after 500+ years. In 2010, researchers found a wheel of medieval cheese in a sealed monastery cellar that was over 600 years old. When analyzed, it contained more protein, calcium, and beneficial bacteria than modern cheese, despite its incredible age. The nutritional density of aged medieval cheese was extraordinary. A single pound contained enough protein and fat to sustain an adult for several days, plus essential vitamins and minerals that prevented numerous deficiency diseases. The aging process actually concentrated these nutrients, making old cheese more valuable than fresh cheese. Medieval peasants knew that properly aged hard cheese could last for decades without refrigeration. They would wrap wheels in cloth soaked with salt water, then store them in cool, dry places. The cheese would develop a protective mold coating that actually enhanced its preservation properties. Food number 4, the eternal seeds, dried legumes. Medieval peasants discovered that certain legumes, when properly dried and stored, could remain viable for centuries. We're not just talking about edible, we're talking about seeds that could still sprout and grow after hundreds of years in storage. This wasn't just food, it was renewable sustenance that could feed future generations. The drying process was crucial. Medieval peasants would harvest legumes at exactly the right moment, when the pods were dry, but the seeds still contained optimal nutrition. They would then spread them on woven mats in well-ventilated areas, turning them regularly to ensure even drying. The final moisture content was so low that harmful bacteria and insects couldn't survive. But here's what's truly remarkable. Properly stored medieval legumes actually improve with age. The proteins become more digestible, the starches convert to more usable forms, and the mineral content becomes more bioavailable. Some varieties of medieval beans found in archaeological sites have shown higher nutritional values than freshly harvested modern beans. In 2008, archaeologists discovered a sealed storage jar in an Egyptian tomb containing lentils that were over 4,000 years old. When planted, these ancient lentils not only sprouted, but produced healthy plants with higher yields than modern varieties. The seeds had maintained their genetic integrity across millennia. Medieval legume storage was an art form. Peasants would layer dried beans, peas, and lentils with aromatic herbs that repelled insects while adding beneficial compounds. They used specific clay vessels that breathed just enough to prevent moisture buildup while keeping out pests. Some storage methods involved burying sealed containers underground, where stable temperatures and humidity created perfect preservation conditions. The variety of medieval legumes was staggering. Unlike our modern monoculture, medieval peasants cultivated dozens of different varieties, each with unique properties. Some were specifically bred for long-term storage, others for quick cooking, and still others for maximum nutrition. This diversity ensured that even if one variety failed, others would survive. Food Number 5. The Black Gold, sourdough. Rye bread. Medieval black rye bread wasn't just sustenance. It was a living ecosystem that could sustain human life for months. Unlike modern bread that molds within days, properly made medieval rye bread could last for weeks or even months without spoiling, actually becoming more nutritious and digestible over time. The secret was in the sourdough fermentation process. Medieval bakers maintained sourdough starters that were passed down through generations, some dating back centuries. These starters contained complex communities of wild yeasts and beneficial bacteria that created an acidic environment hostile to harmful microorganisms. Medieval rye bread was dense, dark, and incredibly nutritious. The long fermentation process broke down anti-nutrients and made minerals more bioavailable. The bread contained complete proteins, essential fatty acids, and B vitamins that prevented numerous deficiency diseases. A single loaf could provide sustenance for days. The preservation properties of this bread were legendary. Medieval travelers would carry loaves that remained edible for entire journeys lasting weeks or months. The bread would gradually harden but never spoil, and could be softened in liquid or eaten as a nutritious hardtack. Archaeological evidence shows that medieval bread ovens were designed to create specific conditions that enhanced preservation. The thick stone walls retained heat for hours, creating a slow, even bake that drove out moisture while preserving nutrients. Some medieval breads found in archaeological sites show no signs of spoilage after centuries. Food Number 6. The Desert Survivor. Rendered animal fat. Medieval peasants understood that properly rendered animal fat was one of the most stable and nutritious foods possible. Unlike modern processed fats, medieval rendered fat could last for years without refrigeration, while providing essential fatty acids and fat-soluble vitamins crucial for survival. The rendering process was meticulous. Fat was slowly heated to drive out all moisture while preserving beneficial compounds. The result was pure, stable fat that was resistant to rancidity and provided concentrated energy. A single pound of rendered fat contained enough calories to sustain an adult for several days. Medieval fat was stored in sealed containers that excluded air and light. Properly stored rendered fat could last for decades, actually improving in flavor and stability over time. Some varieties of medieval fat found in archaeological sites show no signs of rancidity after centuries of storage. The nutritional value of medieval rendered fat was extraordinary. It contained fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, plus essential fatty acids that modern diets often lack. This fat was used not just for cooking, but as medicine, treating everything from wounds to respiratory ailments. Medieval peasants rendered fat from various animals, each with unique properties. Pork fat was prized for its stability and flavor, beef fat for its high melting point, and goose fat for its medicinal properties. Each type was used for specific purposes and stored using different methods. Food number 7, the warrior's fuel, pemmican. If there was ever a perfect survival food, pemmican would be it. This Native American invention was so effective that it sustained entire tribes through brutal winters and enabled warriors to travel for months with nothing but a small pouch of this concentrated nutrition. Medieval European traders who encountered pemmican called it the food of the gods and immediately began adapting the recipe for their own survival needs. True pemmican isn't just dried meat. It's a precisely engineered survival food that contains everything the human body needs to not just survive, but thrive. The traditional recipe combined lean meat, dried to absolute perfection, rendered fat, and dried berries in exact proportions that created a food with indefinite shelf life and complete nutritional profile. The drying process was crucial. Meat was cut into thin strips and dried in specific weather conditions. Low humidity, steady airflow, and temperatures that killed harmful bacteria while preserving beneficial compounds. The meat was dried until it could be powdered, removing every trace of moisture that could cause spoilage. But here's what made pemmican truly extraordinary. The fat-to-protein ratio was scientifically perfect. Modern nutritional analysis shows that pemmican provides the exact macronutrient profile needed for human survival in extreme conditions. The rendered fat provided concentrated energy and fat-soluble vitamins, while the dried meat supplied complete proteins and essential minerals. Archaeological evidence shows that properly made pemmican could last for decades. Samples found in sealed containers from the 1800s were still perfectly edible and nutritionally complete after 150-plus years. The combination of zero moisture content and natural preservatives created a food that actually improved with age. Medieval European adaptations of pemmican included local ingredients like hazelnuts, dried apples, and herbs that added both nutrition and preservation properties. These European versions were carried by crusaders, merchants, and explorers who needed lightweight, imperishable food for long journeys. The energy density of pemmican was unmatched. A single pound could provide enough calories and nutrition to sustain an adult for 3 to 4 days of hard physical labor. This made it invaluable for medieval armies who could carry weeks of provisions in a small pack. Food number 8, the liquid life, fermented fish sauce. Medieval coastal communities discovered that fish could be transformed into a liquid concentrate that never spoiled and provided essential nutrients missing from plant-based diets. This wasn't just seasoning, it was liquid protein that could prevent malnutrition and sustain life when other foods were scarce. The fermentation process was both art and science. Fresh fish were layered with salt in specific ratios, then left to ferment for months or even years. The salt drew out moisture, while beneficial bacteria broke down proteins into easily digestible amino acids. The result was a concentrated liquid that contained complete proteins, essential minerals, and beneficial bacteria. What made this fish sauce truly remarkable was its preservation properties. The high salt content and acidic pH created an environment where harmful bacteria couldn't survive, while beneficial bacteria thrived. Properly made fish sauce could last indefinitely, actually improving in flavor and nutritional value over time. Medieval fish sauce contained nutrients that were difficult to obtain from other sources. It was rich in vitamin B12, essential fatty acids, and trace minerals that prevented numerous deficiency diseases. Coastal communities that regularly consumed fish sauce showed remarkably low rates of malnutrition compared to inland populations. Archaeological discoveries have revealed fish sauce production facilities that operated for centuries. Some of these ancient sources, found in sealed amphorae, are still perfectly preserved after 1,000+ years. Chemical analysis shows that aged fish sauce contains higher concentrations of beneficial compounds than fresh versions. The production methods varied by region, with each area developing unique techniques that enhanced preservation and nutrition. Some medieval fish sauces included seaweed, which added iodine and other essential minerals. Others incorporated specific herbs that provided additional preservation properties and health benefits. Food number 9, the desert's gift, dried dates. Medieval Middle Eastern communities understood that dates weren't just fruit, they were complete survival food that could sustain human life indefinitely. Properly dried dates contained everything needed for survival: carbohydrates for energy, fiber for digestion, minerals for health, and natural sugars that provided immediate fuel for the brain and muscles. The drying process transformed fresh dates into nutritional powerhouses with indefinite shelf life. Dates were harvested at peak ripeness, then dried using techniques that concentrated nutrients while removing moisture. The natural sugars acted as preservatives, creating an environment hostile to harmful bacteria. But here's what made medieval dates extraordinary. They were often dried with the pits intact, which actually enhanced their preservation properties. The pits contained oils and compounds that prevented insect infestation and added subtle flavors that improved with age. Some varieties of dates were specifically cultivated for long-term storage, with higher sugar content and lower moisture levels. Archaeological evidence shows that dates could remain edible for centuries. Samples found in Egyptian tombs were still nutritionally complete after 3,000+ years. The dates had concentrated into dense, candy-like morsels that retained all their original nutrients while developing complex flavors. Medieval date cultivation was incredibly sophisticated. Different varieties were grown for different purposes, some for immediate consumption, others specifically for long-term storage. The storage dates were often pressed into blocks and sealed with wax, creating portable nutrition that could sustain travelers for months. The nutritional density of dried dates was remarkable. They contained potassium, copper, manganese, and fiber in concentrations that prevented numerous health problems. Medieval armies carried dates as emergency rations, knowing that a small quantity could provide sustained energy for days. Medieval date preservation included techniques that modern food science is just beginning to understand. Dates were sometimes buried in sand, which created perfect storage conditions, stable temperature, low humidity, and protection from light and air. Some of these buried caches have been discovered intact after centuries. Food, 10, the mountain's treasure, pine nuts. Medieval alpine communities discovered that pine nuts weren't just food, they were concentrated medicine that could prevent scurvy, provide essential fatty acids, and sustain life through the harshest winters. These small seeds contained more nutrition per ounce than almost any other food, making them invaluable for survival. The harvesting and processing of pine nuts was a community effort that required precise timing and technique. Pine cones were collected at exactly the right moment, when the nuts were mature but the cones hadn't yet opened. The nuts were then extracted and dried, using methods that preserved their oils while preventing rancidity. Properly processed pine nuts could last for years without spoiling. The natural oils contained powerful antioxidants that prevented rancidity, while the low moisture content inhibited bacterial growth. Medieval communities would store pine nuts in sealed containers, often buried underground where stable temperatures ensured long-term preservation. The nutritional profile of pine nuts was extraordinary. They contained complete proteins, essential fatty acids, vitamin E, and minerals like magnesium and zinc. These nutrients were particularly valuable during winter months when other fresh foods were unavailable. Archaeological evidence shows that pine nut storage was a sophisticated operation. Medieval communities built specialized storage facilities designed to maintain optimal conditions for nut preservation. Some of these storage areas contained pine nuts that remained edible after centuries. Medieval pine nut preparation included techniques that enhanced both nutrition and preservation. Nuts were sometimes lightly roasted to concentrate flavors and extend shelf life. Others were ground into paste and mixed with honey, creating concentrated nutrition bars that could sustain travelers for weeks. Food, round 11, the warrior's bread, hardtack. Medieval hardtack wasn't just emergency food, it was engineered sustenance that could survive any condition while providing essential carbohydrates and calories. This simple combination of flour, water, and salt created a food so durable that it became the foundation of medieval military campaigns and long-distance trade. The baking process was crucial to hardtack's immortality. The dough was rolled thin and baked at specific temperatures that drove out all moisture, while creating a dense, rock-hard texture. Properly made hardtack contained less than 3% moisture, making it impossible for bacteria or mold to survive. But medieval hardtack was far superior to modern versions. It was made from whole grain flours that retained nutrients and often included seeds, nuts, or dried herbs that added both nutrition and preservation properties. Some varieties were made with sourdough starters that improved digestibility and added beneficial bacteria. Archaeological discoveries have revealed hardtack that remained perfectly edible after 500+ years. These ancient crackers showed no signs of spoilage and retained their nutritional value despite their incredible age. The simple ingredients and careful preparation created a food that truly defied time. Medieval hardtack came in many varieties, each designed for specific purposes. Ship's biscuit was extra hard and dense for long sea voyages. Soldier's bread was lighter and easier to eat quickly. Travelers' hardtack included dried fruits and nuts for additional nutrition. The preparation methods varied by region, with each area developing techniques that enhanced preservation and nutrition. Some medieval hardtack was double-baked to ensure complete moisture removal. Others were sealed with rendered fat or honey to create additional protection against moisture and pests. Food, Next 12. The ocean's bounty, dried seaweed. Medieval coastal communities understood that seaweed wasn't just food, it was medicine that provided essential nutrients impossible to obtain from land-based plants. Properly dried seaweed could last indefinitely while providing iodine, minerals, and vitamins that prevented numerous deficiency diseases. The harvesting and drying of seaweed required precise timing and technique. Seaweed was collected during specific tidal conditions when nutrient content was highest. It was then dried using methods that preserved beneficial compounds while removing moisture that could cause spoilage. Different types of seaweed were used for different purposes. Some varieties were prized for their mineral content, others for their protein levels, and still others for their medicinal properties. Medieval communities maintained detailed knowledge about which seaweeds to harvest, when and how to process them for maximum benefit. The preservation properties of dried seaweed were remarkable. The high mineral content and natural compounds created an environment hostile to harmful bacteria. Properly dried seaweed could last for decades, actually concentrating in nutrition and developing more complex flavors over time. Archaeological evidence shows that seaweed was a crucial survival food for medieval coastal populations. Storage facilities contained varieties of dried seaweed that remained perfectly preserved after centuries. These ancient seaweeds retained their nutritional value and showed no signs of deterioration. Medieval seaweed preparation included sophisticated techniques that enhanced both nutrition and preservation. Some varieties were fermented before drying, which added beneficial bacteria and improved digestibility. Others were ground into powder and mixed with salt, creating seasoning blends that provided essential minerals. Food, Modern 13, the forest's medicine, dried mushrooms. Medieval forest communities discovered that certain mushrooms, when properly dried, became concentrated medicine that could boost immunity, provide essential nutrients, and sustain life through difficult times. These weren't just food, they were pharmaceutical-grade nutrition that could prevent and treat numerous health conditions. The selection and drying of mushrooms required extensive knowledge passed down through generations. Only specific varieties were chosen for long-term storage, and they had to be harvested at exactly the right time and processed using precise methods that preserved their beneficial compounds. Properly dried mushrooms could last for years while retaining their nutritional and medicinal properties. The drying process concentrated beneficial compounds like beta-glucans, which boosted immune function and provided protection against disease. Some varieties actually became more potent with age. Medieval mushroom preservation was a closely guarded art. Different varieties required different drying methods. Some were air-dried, others were smoked, and still others were dried with specific herbs that enhanced their preservation properties. The knowledge of which mushrooms to preserve and how to process them was often kept within families for generations. Archaeological discoveries have revealed medieval mushroom storage facilities that contained perfectly preserved specimens after centuries. These ancient mushrooms retained their beneficial compounds and showed remarkable resistance to decay and pest infestation. The medicinal properties of dried mushrooms were well understood by medieval communities. Specific varieties were used to treat different conditions, some for respiratory ailments, others for digestive problems, and still others for boosting overall health and vitality. Food, Surrender 14. The traveler's friend. Dried fruit leather. Medieval communities transformed fresh fruits into concentrated nutrition that could last for years while providing essential vitamins and natural sugars. Fruit leather wasn't just candy. It was engineered nutrition that could prevent scurvy, provide quick energy, and sustain travelers through long journeys. The preparation of fruit leather required precise timing and technique. Fruits were harvested at peak ripeness when sugar content was highest, then processed using methods that concentrated nutrients while removing moisture. The natural sugars acted as preservatives, creating a food with indefinite shelf life. Different fruits were used for different purposes. Some varieties were prized for their vitamin C content, others for their mineral levels, and still others for their energy-providing natural sugars. Medieval communities often combined multiple fruits to create leather with balanced nutrition. The preservation properties of fruit leather were remarkable. The high sugar content and low moisture created an environment where harmful bacteria couldn't survive. Properly made fruit leather could last for decades, actually improving in flavor and developing more complex tastes over time. Archaeological evidence shows that fruit leather was a crucial survival food for medieval populations. Samples found in sealed containers remained perfectly edible after centuries, retaining their nutritional value and showing no signs of spoilage. Medieval fruit leather preparation included sophisticated techniques that enhanced both nutrition and preservation. Some varieties were made with added honey or spices that provided additional preservation properties. Others were pressed into specific shapes and sizes that made them easier to store and transport. Food number 15. The grain of eternity. Whole barley. Medieval communities understood that barley wasn't just grain, it was complete nutrition that could sustain human life indefinitely when properly stored. Whole barley contained everything needed for survival: carbohydrates for energy, protein for muscle maintenance, fiber for digestion, and essential minerals for health. The storage of barley required sophisticated techniques that protected the grain from moisture, pests, and spoilage. Barley was stored in sealed containers with specific herbs and minerals that repelled insects while maintaining optimal conditions for long-term preservation. Properly stored barley could remain viable for decades, actually improving in some nutritional aspects over time. The grain developed more complex flavors and became easier to digest as natural enzymes slowly broke down anti-nutrients. Some varieties of medieval barley found in archaeological sites were still capable of sprouting after centuries. The nutritional density of whole barley was extraordinary. It contained complete proteins, essential fatty acids, B vitamins, and minerals like selenium and magnesium. This made it invaluable for preventing malnutrition and maintaining health during times of scarcity. Medieval barley cultivation included varieties specifically bred for long-term storage. These varieties had harder hulls that protected the grain from pests and moisture, and higher concentrations of natural preservatives that extended shelf life. These 15 immortal foods represent more than just survival techniques. They represent a complete understanding of nutrition and preservation that we've almost completely lost. Our ancestors didn't just survive. They thrived using foods that were more nutritious, more sustainable, and more reliable than anything in our modern food system. The knowledge contained in these ancient preservation methods could literally save your life in any crisis. While we depend on fragile supply chains and artificial preservatives, our ancestors possessed foods that could sustain human civilization through any catastrophe. The time has come to reclaim this lost wisdom before it disappears forever.